Hello besties, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my September 2025 bullet journal setup. I won't lie guys, I have been racking my brain for the past couple of weeks of what I want to film. This always happens last minute before a new monthly setup. I'm like, okay, what do I do? What do I do? And for the past couple of months, I really feel like my bullet journal setups have been quite good. Not to toot my own horn or anything, but over the summer, I had some really good setups that I pushed myself creatively and I feel like they had really good outcomes. And so of course I want to keep that ball rolling going into the first month of autumn, September. If you didn't know, autumn is my favorite season, so I'm so excited to get into these more cooler months. And I wanted to, of course, create something just as good as the past couple of months, in my humble opinion. So if you couldn't already tell, for the month of September, we're going to be doing a stained glass theme. And I'm currently starting out by drawing the art for the cover page in my sketchbook. I always do this because I usually draw with alcohol markers and it bleeds through paper. So doing it on a separate piece of paper that I will eventually tape in my journal makes things much easier for me. And yeah, the night before I started filming everything, I literally was sketching. In fact, I was sketching this artwork the day of filming. Like, things were quite last minute for me. It's because I've been in the hectic state of moving right now. I'm currently gonna move back to school in Dallas for the next year of college, so I'm trying to get my life together right now. So everything was a bit last minute, but I think the artwork turned out kind of good. In fact, I actually think it looks better actually with just the line art than it does when it gets colored in, but we'll talk about all the colors in just a minute. Anyway, but as you can see, this is a stained glass fairy portrait. So I wanted to do a fairy drawing because I feel like, you know, autumn and fairies, it kind of goes together. Kind of similar to how like spring and fairies goes together, but also like summer and mermaids. Like I feel like autumn and like pixie, sprite, fairies, like that kind of vibe goes together. And I also want to do something stained glass because honestly, I've always wanted to do a stained glass bullet journal theme. I've thought about it for multiple months and always just changed my mind last minute. And so this month I was like, you know what? We're doing it. We're going all the way, we're doing it. Y'all know that TikTok audio. Anyway, but yeah, I used some inspiration pictures that I'll put here on the screen to kind of inspire my artwork here, but I'm using two different types of line art, or two different thicknesses. I showed you at the beginning I'm using Ohuhu fine liners, one in the size 0.3 and one in the size 1.0, and I specifically did this to add some differences between the thick and thin lines because I feel like that looked the most like stained glass. Anyway, we'll talk about the artwork more in just a second, but let's talk about the alcohol marker process first. You guys know how much I love using alcohol markers for the artwork in my bullet journal, and for the September theme we are doing no different. We're using them yet again, but I'm always trying to improve my skill, my technique, and make sure that my art gets better every month. So I wanted to refresh my alcohol marker knowledge, and I did so with a course called Stamped to Life, Stunning Color Made Simple by Jamie Daughtery that I took on Craftsy, the sponsor of today's video. Craftsy is your online resource for all things creative. It is a video platform site where they teach through instructional videos taught by talented experts. Their professional instructors walk you through each technique with step-by-step demonstrations, providing their expert tips and tricks in all sorts of artistic categories, including sewing, drawing, gardening, baking, crochet, photography, and many more. I took this class by Jamie Daughtery about alcohol marker and water pencil art techniques, which was really cool to combine the two, but it was also a great reminder about light and shadow and how to balance contrast in an art piece, which is always a good thing to refresh your mind about when you're making art online all the time. Her art style is super fun and creative, and she talked about the colorless blender, which I've always had such difficulty using. She was using it to add highlights to her piece, not only to blend colors together, but to actually subtract and lighten colors that she'd already colored previously. How many times can you say color in one sentence, Sophie? But it was actually really enlightening to me because it's always been an alcohol marker that has intimidated me. I rarely ever use it in my artwork, and so it was really cool to learn from her and to see how she plays with this new technique, because now I feel like I have the tools to use it in my own artwork, including this September bullet journal setup. Craftsy is always creating new classes to keep you coming back for more and to help you stay inspired. You can also connect with fellow artists and creatives to share ideas and connect online. As a member, you'll also have access to Craftsy's live streaming tutorials where their expert instructors answer questions, share their tips and tricks, and engage with the community in real time. So if you're interested, the first 1,000 of you to go and click the link in the description box below will get a full year of premium membership to Craftsy for only $1.49, which is a crazy steal. This is valid for new members only, but I hope it encourages you to get into a new hobby, including alcohol markers or any other hobby, kind of like I did. Thank you so much to Craftsy for sponsoring this video, and let's get back into the artwork for today's spread. Alrighty, so you can already tell that I am starting with the alcohol markers here now that the fine liner is done. Talking about the line art for just one more moment because I think it's a big part of this stained glass picture here. Like I was saying a minute ago, I was trying to differentiate between thick and thin lines because I feel like one big thing about stained glass is that you can tell the big shapes because they have thicker, bolder outlines. I'll put a couple more pictures here on the screen of inspiration I was kind of drawing from, not for the image itself, but for the style of line art, because obviously with real stained stained glass, every panel or pane, I suppose, of glass is separate. So there is a little bit of like filler in between, and that's what the black line art is. But if they're trying to make pictures or shapes or really emphasize a certain part of the stained glass artwork, in this case emphasizing the fairy, the line art around the body of the fairy is going to be thicker to really emphasize those pieces of glass standing out from the background. So because I'm going to be using a lot of very similar colors, as you'll see towards the end of this artwork, or I suppose you could see from the thumbnail of the video, I wanted to really make the fairy stand out. So I'm using the 0.3 fine liner for all of the little details, including all of the details in the wings, her top, the background, but then I'm using the thicker 1.0 fine liner for outlining around her body and wings, and also for outlining the frame of the window itself to also add some contrast there. It may not look very different to you, and I totally understand that. It's kind of a minute shift, a minute difference, but for me, I think it really emphasizes that stained glass look, and it also makes this seem like a coloring book. It honestly felt like once I got the line art done, which was kind of the hard part because it's always scary to really finalize those designs, coming in with the markers was so much easier because it really was just coloring. Like, this is basically like exactly what we would do in kindergarten. You're just coloring in the lines and calling it good. I mean, for me, there's a lot more picking and choosing with the coloring, like the specific colors I'm choosing, of course. And with the stained glass too, it was a little more difficult for me to choose the colors because usually what I do when I'm choosing colors for alcohol marker artwork is I will choose one base color and then 1 to 2 shadowy colors to add on top and blend. But with the stained glass effect here, I really wasn't trying to add too much shadowing. I mean, on her face, on her hair, on her body, I did do some shadowy effects because I wanted to make it look a little bit more detailed than just like a plain red swath of hair, you know? But for the wings itself, the texture of the wings, for the texture of her shirt, for the background, all of those panes of glass are filled in with one single color. There is no shading or depth or adding extra bits to it. And so what I did to add more variety was I chose 2 of every color, basically, like 2 different shades of this dark, almost aquamarine / navy blue. I have a couple different shades of beigey yellow, a couple different shades of burnt orangey red for the hair. And when I did different panes of glass around her hair in the background, on the wings, the frame, things like that, I basically just chose between those 2 colors and mixed them, going back and forth to add the appearance of different colors that stained glass comes across in, but I wasn't adding shading to each of the panels. I was just coloring them in next to each other in very, very similar tones of blue. I think her blouse / shirt, whatever you want to call it, is the most specific example of this because the 2 shades of blue are very, very similar. The other ones are a little bit more distinguishable. Like, for example, the very outer border of the frame is a light brown and a dark brown going back and forth. But those 2 are quite similar colors, but they're far enough away from each other in lightness, I suppose, and value, that they do look distinguishably different. The blouse is the one that's hardest to tell apart because the blues are so similar in color, but overall I think that this effect is definitely out of my comfort zone. I'm used to adding shadow and I really couldn't do that with this one, and I had to focus more about where to put those different colors to make them not necessarily touch and try to evenly disperse my different colors throughout the entire background, things like that. So it was a little bit more of a different way to think when I was coloring, but the final result is, I'm honestly think pretty good. Definitely out of my comfort zone, something new for me, but something nice after a couple months of doing very similar portraits. This is still a portrait drawing for sure, but it's just a little different, you know, and I like to try something new sometimes. Now you guys could tell that I ended up doing a different background. It was going to be very light, similar to the color of the wings, but I wanted it to be more dark and moody because we are getting into those fall months. So I spent a couple minutes really deepening the colors and using green for the very top of the inside background of the frame instead of those yellowy colors, making the browns at the bottom a little darker, a little deeper, also darkening around the frame. And I think that these choices were really good and just adding more contrast. My last little touch is adding in a white gel pen to highlight, you know, parts of her hair, her lips, some sparkles around the diamonds in the frame. And yeah, with that, this artwork, which took me an hour, maybe 2, is finally done. Definitely different for me. I still have kind of mixed feelings about it. I think it's a really nice piece, I won't lie, but I do think that it is different for me and I would change some things about it if I did it again. For example, I think that the wings are very beautiful and I like how the colors are interdispersed between the, I don't even know, like parts of the wing, I suppose, but I think it is a very stark contrast compared to the dark background, and if the wings were supposed to be like transparent or at least translucent, they probably would be a little darker to mimic the darkness in the background. But that being said, I still don't mind that they're lighter because it does match the frame of the stained glass and also again adds more contrast in it. So I might make small tweaks if I did it again, but I'm still quite happy with it, and I hope that you guys love this cover page artwork. On the left here, because I didn't have the name of the month in the artwork anywhere at all, I just wanted to put a simple SEP for September on the left. I am using a different font here than I usually do. I like to use calligraphy a lot, but I've done that a lot recently, so I pulled out Pinterest and looked up some kind of gothic, star-inspired fonts, and I found this one. I'll put a picture here on the screen because I don't remember the name of it per se, but I love looking up fonts, finding an alphabet of all the different letters, and then literally just copying the letters and drawing them into my journal because it, you know, broadens my spectrum of fonts that I can use in the future. It's always weird to learn a new font and like try to mimic how the letters are curved or the spacing, the tracking, like what's different about the way that they drew these letters and things like that when they were designing the fonts. So at first it's always a little uncomfortable, but if I continue using this font for the rest of the month, by the end of the month I'll be so used to it and I can almost draw the letters without even having to look at the reference image. And so at that point, it's like when I go into future months, I now have this font in my arsenal, in my disposal, if I want to use it again. Similar to how you teach yourself how to draw new things, I feel like copying fonts is very similar for me because it is more about drawing and less about like the typography of it. So it's just like a different aspect of bullet journaling that I like to experiment with sometimes, and I hope that you guys appreciate it because it doesn't happen often, but when it does, I really enjoy the final result. All right, so we've already flipped the page here. I really need to stop yapping about fonts. Let's talk about this calendar page. Since we're going into September, it is the start of college again for me. I'm going into my junior year, which by the way, if you guys didn't see my academic bullet journal setup last week that I posted, actually it was a couple days ago that I posted it, make sure you go check it out. It was a really fun video and I have a giveaway in that should still be going as of the time that you're watching this, if you're watching this on the Saturday it comes out. So go check out that video if you missed it. But I was talking in that video about when the months of school come around, I always have so much more to plan and I really need a lot of calendar space to interdisperse my academic planning with my actual other life planning, like social things, work, things like that. And so I really like using small calendars during the summer if possible. Although I did use a pretty big one for August, I won't lie, but I feel like the past couple months before that either had no calendar or a small calendar, but for September I really needed a big calendar to take up a lot of space. Flipping on to the next page already, I'm really going through this fast. Wow, the next page is my academic planner, very similar to the one that I made in last week's video. It is basically a big chart. Now each of these 4 columns is divided into the 4 different weeks of September where I have classes, and then each row is a different class. So I have French, accounting, finance, marketing, and film. And so in each box, when it corresponds to the different weeks, I will just put all of my assignments, my discussion boards, papers, exams, things like that on the day that it's due. And that way the week of, I can always look ahead and be like, okay, what do I have to do this week? What do I have to figure out? Stuff like that. I like to keep this very close to the calendar. And in fact, you can tell that I already cut the left side of this spread. It's because it is a Dutch door. So I can very easily flip between the calendar spread and this page and just, you know, figure out what days I have to work on my homework, what days I have to go do work and other things. I sometimes also like to put my exams in my calendar, like the big things going on in my actual calendar to really keep my mind around everything. But when I get into my weekly spreads later in this month, I will also add more academic planning along with my weekly to-dos. So this is just a system that helps me a lot. Again, I talked about it a lot more in my last video if you want more explanation about it, but going back and forth between these 2 pages, even though it looks like a lot of boxes right now, which it really just is, trust me though, it is so imperative when I get into the school semester to keep up with all of my assignments. All right, so before we get back into the actual spread of my bullet journal, we are doing another piece of artwork. I know a lot of my videos recently have been really heavily art focused and less about the spread itself, and it's because this art takes me a while. I actually, if you don't know, put my bullet journal pages, at least in this video, when I'm in my journal, I speed them up at 8 times speed, but I speed up my artwork at 10 times speed because it takes me so much longer and I want it to be more equal and balanced in the video itself. But there's just so much more footage to go through whenever I'm making art like this because it's so detailed and takes me a while. I won't lie though, doing this one, because it's quite similar to the first artwork, we're doing a very similar stained glass picture here with the same style of framing with the diamonds and the 2 skinny panels on the left and right. It's just the middle of the stained glass of the actual artwork in the middle that's going to be different. This one is just florals, leaves, and a very busy background. Kind of similar, but definitely different from the cover page, but since I already did something quite similar once before, it's always easier to replicate the exact same styles once you've figured it out first. That's why the first artwork always takes me the longest, because I'm always like trying to figure out, okay, where does this color go? Do I like this here? Before I actually place this down, should I think about this first? You know, it takes me a little bit of thinking and planning beforehand, but when I do it for a second time, it's so much easier and goes so much faster. So right now I'm doing the two different panels, and as you can see, they are not actually connected in the middle. It looks a little backwards right now, but I'm actually going to be putting these two panels on the left and right of the spread. You'll see in just a few minutes. I think it looks really, really cool. But all that to say is I will be cutting this paper in the middle, so you won't actually see that little strip of white that I'm leaving in between the two panels, but I definitely wanted to draw them as if it was symmetrical to make sure that everything was as even as it could be. Now, are the two drawings completely mirror images of each other? Absolutely not. There's actually some parts of it that I drew the stem in a completely opposite direction. It's not at all perfect, but that's okay because I feel like in the final design in my spread, they're going to be pretty separated enough that you won't have to tell the difference and like be able to spot the mistakes in the symmetry. It'll be far enough away that it just looks like it's basically the exact same thing. Another thing is I was talking to you guys earlier about using Craftsy and how I learned how to use the color blender to basically pick up color. I don't know if you noticed earlier, I actually did use that technique multiple times while drawing this picture because again, I don't plan out where I'm going to put all the colors beforehand. I basically just do them on the fly as I'm going. And so there were a couple times where I accidentally used a darker color. In recent months, I've tried to keep my color palettes pretty small or monochrome. Like for example, last month in August, it was basically just blue, teal, and black. Those are my color palettes for the entire month. And so it's quite different to this month where I have different shades of blue, yellow, orange, brown, green. There's a lot more going on this month, and you can't tell, but I had a pile of markers to the side of my filming station where I was using them. And so a couple times I accidentally picked a darker color than I wanted to. When you're using alcohol markers, you can always go on top of a lighter color with a darker one, but it's harder to do the reverse. So I actually used the color blender to kind of pick up that color, especially when it was wet. When I first put it down, it's very easy to just rub that color blender on top of it, and it really does lighten it and allow me to use the correct lighter color on top of that space. So you may have missed it, but in the very top left of the frame, I accidentally used a slightly darker color brown/orange than I wanted to in like the light yellowy orange frame. So I fixed that in the second time and I thought it was really cool. So honestly, I really do appreciate that video for teaching me it because I used it in real time and it was really helpful. Finishing up this artwork with that white gel pen once again, I think that this one is more successful than the first piece in that the gradient in the background going from teal at the very top to blue to brown looks a lot more smooth than it does on the first time. Again, the second time you do things, it's always so much easier. I like the gradient on the first one, don't get me wrong, but again, I'm not actually blending. I'm just going back and forth between the different panels of glass in these pictures and hoping that they're spread out enough to seem like a gradient blend whenever you blur your eyes. So I think that the second try looked a lot better, and hopefully if I replicate similar artwork in the weekly spreads, it'll also continue to improve. So like I said, I'm definitely going to be cutting out these two pieces. They are not going to be attached to each other. In fact, they're going to be completely opposite. So I know that I drew them facing each other, but I'm actually going to be facing them opposite of each other on the edges of these spreads. Now, I did a Dutch door. You guys saw me cut the paper in between the calendar page and academic planner page. I did one more page on the very end for habit tracking and expenses tracking, and so that's where I'm putting the second piece, the second panel on the very end. Now, I drew these panels a little bit taller or a little bit longer than the actual height of the journal, so I'd have a little bit of wiggle room to move them around and cut off the top and bottom if necessary, but I tried my hardest to get this as close to the very edge of the spread without going a little bit over, so it seems to perfectly frame the calendar and the pages in the middle. Now, the only issue is I accidentally made them a teensy little bit too wide, so when the Dutch door is open, it does cover a teeny bit of the diamond artwork on the very end, which does annoy me a little bit. I wanted them to be a little bit skinnier, but when I was adding those multiple borders on the edge of the design, I guess I may have miscalculated how thick it was and gone a little bit overboard, but it doesn't bother me too much because the idea of the frame is still there. I think it looks really cool. It's almost like you're in a church with stained glass, and like if you're looking down the center of the church and there are two windows to your left and right, just in this case, the center of the church is my habit tracker and expenses tracker. This metaphor is not really going anywhere good, but the point is that the two pieces are almost like full windows framing the stuff in the middle, but you can only see part of the windows, if that makes sense. I think that this is a great way to add art to your spread because, in fact, I actually use Dutch stores all the time to do this because you only have to do like one piece of artwork, but it can last for multiple spreads because you can flip through multiple pages, like the calendar, the academic planning, and this spread you can flip through while still seeing the art on both sides. So it saves me time, energy, and allows me to place more detail in the artwork that I'm using because it is stretching for more than one page. Now, I tried to find water-based markers that matched the colors for the alcohol-based markers so that everything goes together. And I also tried to use the diamond motif, especially when using the grid for the calendar or for the expenses tracker, almost like the diamond is the little piece holding the different panes of, quote, glass together, even though it's really just boxes in the spread. I think it's just a very easy motif to add to this setup and to continue using in weekly spreads in the future. So with that being said, this is the end of the setup, guys. I hope you really enjoyed it. Definitely a different style for me this month. I'm kind of going a little bit out of my comfort zone with this artwork, with this font style, but I hope that you guys love it, and I'm so excited to use these pages. As always, don't forget to subscribe. I post new bullet journaling videos every single Saturday, and don't forget to go click the link in the description box below to check out Craftsy and get an entire year's worth of premium subscription for only $1.49. I will put my most recent video with the giveaway here on the screen so you can go check it out. Love you so much, and I will see you next week.